And what's going on, guys? Alex here, and today I'd like to talk to you about silencing mental disorders. This will be first episode in the series of episodes about mental health and related struggles. Silencing and ignoring problems is a very awful practice in our life. I have noticed that especially for previous generations, at least if we're talking about Eastern Europe and Russia, they suppose that silencing a problem is a very good method of solving it, or at least that's one of the methods of solving the problem. But it is not, and here's why. First of all, and first thing which I can think about if we are talking about silencing problems or ignoring the problems, is that internet gave us access to a lot of information at once, and to make a home research now it's really easy. Of course, you need to know how to do it properly, so you need a trustworthy sources, legit statistics, use of basic logics, to have at least some type of scientific background in this topic in order to understand whether the information you are reading is legit or it is a complete fake. But the thing is that right now you can connect to almost every person in the world, and you can have information from each and every country which is updated almost daily. Look at least for the COVID statistics right now. It is updated daily, and you can see what is happening in almost every country. And the thing is that right now you can know you can get more objective data from all around the globe. And that's the first thing why ignoring and silencing the problems doesn't work right now, because many people supposed that the problem which they are meeting, that this problem is only is actual for them, and it's not so popular all around the world. And to analyze it, you need to have a really good scientific background, because you needed to go to the library, and etc, etc, etc. But the thing right now is that you can get information about anything, and you can read about it, and you can get very legit information. Of course, if you're using trustworthy sources and everything which I have mentioned before. And the thing is that right now you can actually see what is going on, and you can know that you're not the only one. You can find the support in the internet, because it feels for modern generation and not as for the previous generation, which who are using internet methods only as a method of decent communicating or finding information, the same as, for example, the library. But modern generation, they're almost the whole world, another separate world, is right now in the internet, and that's why they can find their emotional support. They can find information they need. They can find statistics and read what to do, how other people have dealt with the same problem, even if this problem is very, very narrow, and the field which they are researching is a very, very, very narrow. For example, if we're talking about mental disorders, depression is quite popular and so on. But the thing is that if we are talking about some other diseases, some genetical diseases, lots of them are not so popular and are met only in something about 1 in 10,000 or 20,000 people. And that's why it's quite difficult to find information about it. But you can find information about this pathology, and you can find support, and you can read histories of actual patients who have dealt with it. And the same can be applied for the mental disorders, because people can share, because people can find support, and people can understand what's going on with them, and to feel that they are not alone with such trouble. The next thing is that it seems counterintuitive for modern generation that there are problems which you cannot talk about with your friends or family. Because if you have a problem, you'd like to share it, you'd like to ask for help if you don't know how to solve it. And that's very counterintuitive for modern people. At least I'm talking right now only about Eastern Europe and Russia, because the mentality of people here is very similar, despite the fact that in Russia, there are differences, but mostly they are very similar, especially if we're talking about some older generations. But the thing is that people want to share and want to ask for help. I don't know, people can ask for help from relatives, from friends, from family, from therapists, and so on, in order to solve the problem, and not to silence or ignore the problem. And that seems counterintuitive for modern people. But if we're talking about older generations, it seems like they find that if you are silencing and if you're pretending that the problem doesn't exist, they suppose that it solves the problem and that the problem really stops existing. But it is really not true. And the reason why this is happening, I can see that there are more trustworthy and open relationships between modern people. That's why we're having less stigma, and we can talk about much more things comparing to our parents or some older people. And that's why, because of these trustworthy and open relationships, and I'm not talking about open relationships in the condition of Swedish family, and so on. I'm talking here only about relationships between people when they can share not only some good stuff but also some bad stuff or their problems and so on. And this is not understood as something bad and so on. And the thing that we're having less stigma and we can talk about things, we can share these things, it helps, at least for some of us, for our mental health. To be honest, I have met a very, very awful combination in the Eastern Europe families, and which provides to lots of mental disorders, and which catalyzes lots of mental disorders. And that's, first of all, it's silencing your problems even with your family members because they won't understand. And that's why you're keeping all of these problems to yourself. And because of that, the problems, they gather, they pile up, and after some time you're having lots of them and you don't know how to deal with them. And that's why you start doing very stupid things. And simply because you don't know how to ask for help or where to ask for help, because the only thing you're having is your family. I have met this situation when I was 14-15 years old, because I didn't share lots of things with my friends, and the only thing which I had was my family, which couldn't understand me completely. The next thing, which is very awful in Eastern European families mostly, not all of them but mostly, is that people are not trying to understand each other, and they are creating stigma around some of the problems, because that means that I cannot go to my family and talk about lots of stuff, because they simply won't understand, and because they even won't try to understand. Because they're having their own point of view, and there is completely no possibilities to change their mind. If we're talking about some of the problems, for example, if we're talking about LGBT, if we're talking about mental health, and so on. Next thing, which is third thing, which is really, really awful, is not knowing about such thing as personal boundaries. And here I'm talking about such primitive things as knocking on the door before entering, and so on. Such primitive thing, but people don't understand that. People don't understand that you have personal space, that they will enter to your personal space without even thinking, and without you asking, and that's very, very awful. Next thing, and one of the most important things which I find, which is right now in the Eastern Europe countries and especially in Russia, is that people very much to make jokes about very serious topics. And right now I'm talking about, for example, Russian official channels in Twitter. Like you can enter Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and you can look for one of the videos about like European type of Christmas or something like that, and there are lots of hyperbolization, joking around, not knowing borders, and they are making jokes out of very, very serious topics. And because that's not like some private persons, it's like official Russia channel, and the same is going on the news. And because of this is shared on the news, on the TV channels, because of that, our parents still they are seeing like it's okay to joke around about such topics. Like it's nothing serious. Like you can joke around because it has been shown on TV. The official channels are talking about it, about such trash, and because of that, they don't understand that these topics really matter, and these things are really important to some people, and this creates lots of problems, and you cannot make them change their mind, because in their minds, like official channels in Twitter or official channels on TV are much more important than some argumented opinion, even if it is based on some scientific facts. And now imagine the situation which most of the people, and especially teenagers in Eastern Europe are existing right now, is that you cannot share lots of your problems, especially if they're mental health related to your own family. You cannot talk about it. You're afraid to share it with your friends because you suppose that they won't understand it. You're a very lucky person if you can do it, but there are lots of people who cannot. And now imagine that also you're like still in the high school, in the middle school, it doesn't matter. But the thing is that these topics are not talked about at all, because I remember very pretty well that there were non-topics on any of the subjects where we were talking about such topics as mental health, as anxiety, depression, PTSD, about some trauma-related topics, and so on. And we actually didn't know how to ask for help, where to ask for help, what should we do, and so on. And I find it really, really dumb thing, because you need, this is very important topic, and you need to know where you can ask for help, where you can, what you should do if you suppose that you have such type of problem. And the problem which I have met is that during my first course of the medical school, I had some type of of the mental breakdown, and I even didn't recognize it. Not because I was ignoring it, but simply because I didn't know what was going on with me. And I didn't know where to ask for help, and it took me 1.5 more years in order to ask for help and to start dealing with it, because it really became much bigger problem. And here is the next problem which I have met, is that, okay, in Latvia, psychiatry and mental health clinics, in governmental mental health clinics, are completely free of charge. But the thing is that if you'd like to have a psychotherapist appointment on a regular basis, you can have one only in one clinic, and you should pay like a pretty big amount of money if we're talking about an average Latvian salary. If you're talking about average Latvian salary of something about 1,000 euros, then the appointment there was something from 300 to 500 euro a month, if we are talking about a one-time-a-week appointment. And that's a lot. That's very a lot. And imagine that you cannot talk about your problems around your family. You're afraid to talk about your problems around your friends. So the only thing which has left for you is like a psychotherapist, if you of course know that such people like exist and you can share with them and they will help. that's also a very big problem because lots of people don't know about this, and they are researching the mental disorders only in the case if they are dealing with one. And that's really, really horrible. And you were talking about the situation in the Eastern Europe and especially in Latvia. That's a very big problem. You can have regular visits for your to your psychiatrist free of charge, yes, but therapists, no. And the point of this part of this episode is that even if you can afford to visit the therapist regularly, there are not so many places to go. I know only about 2 clinics, and it's not a big one. In one clinic it's something about 20 specialists there. Of course there are some private practices for some people. In the second clinic there is something about 5 or 6 specialists there, and it costs lots of money. Even for a person who can pay for that, it costs a lot, and you don't have lots of choice where to go and how to go. And if they are all booked up, you don't have any much options left. And if we're talking about some person who is a student who is working as well, and even if we're talking about the student who's working on the one workplace, still you're very short of time, and it's pretty hard for you to find time to visit every single week for a psychotherapist session. And still, it's as I said before, it's a very big problem. And the problem also is that you cannot talk, and many people are afraid to talk about these problems around their family or friends. And that's not the biggest problem, to be honest. The biggest problem, which I find there is right now, at least in my country, is silencing and ignoring problems around family members, or even worse, if we're talking about mental disorders, that's stigmatization. From my personal experience, my family didn't understand why I need to visit psychiatrist. Not money was the concern. I paid for that myself. There was constant reminders to quit therapy almost after each session, and I quit it. I quit it last year, somewhere around April or May, when I felt better. And despite recommendations to continue the therapy for a little bit longer, I quitted it still, but I was tired of hearing that, and then the disease returned. Because I had experience in recognizing it, I asked for help on the early stages and everything therapy right now. But the thing is that this type of stigmatization, it doesn't help, and this type of stereotypes that psychiatrists the only thing they want is to drug you, is to make you less productive, is to make a zombie from you. It doesn't work. It's still very old stereotypes, and it's very, very, very awful. The next thing from the personal experience is that talking about trauma in my family is almost impossible. And it is very important to accept it, to accept the trauma and not to ignore it. And every person, very important to know that every person has its own limits, and that the problems should be solved and not silenced, and shall solved in scientifically proved way. Because I have seen too much examples of problem solving through magic, religion, only prayers, and etc. I can understand prayers, I can understand why people are doing that, because they feel like they cannot do anything else. I understand why people are praying during the operation of their relative, because they don't know what else to do, and they feel like it will help. But if we're talking about some type of problems which you should solve right now, some problems with your health, the same mental diseases like cancer and so on, and you met these problems and you're not solving it, and you're trying to solve it through prayers, it's very dumb. It's very dumb, and it's not problem solving. It's almost the same as ignoring problems, because you're calming yourself with that, and that's simply an idiotic type of solution. Also, one more example from my personal experience about not trustworthy environment, and the thing which has created for me lots of problems for a couple of years, is that there was a very hypocrite teacher at our school who said that we can share the problems with her and she will help and so on, and who discussed my personal problems during class in high school with completely different class who had nothing to do with the school or these people, and who has discussed it with the very completely different people, and they were not like other teachers, they were like students as well. And the same also goes for family. They are talking about personal things with strangers when you specifically have told them not to discuss it with anybody. And this not trustworthy environment, it doesn't help as well, and it exists in lots of places. And we're not having such thing as like ethical committee which will help you with such type of hypocrite teachers, because there is not much that they can do, because it's like high school, and it's like it's a complete disaster, and that's why we're having like lots of problems. But the question which I also would like to ask during this episode is how I ended up where I am today. I am here where I am today only because I had to break down almost everything what I have learned about psychiatry, social interactions, and to build everything from scratch. Because of such cool stories from my family, from my parents, from their friends, from the teachers, who have told about the psychiatry, which drugs you, makes you a zombie, never ask for help from the psychiatrist, psychology is for losers, and so on, get your shit together, and other cool things. I broke down everything, almost everything what I have known about it, and I had to build everything from scratch. Doing a retrospective about my mental disorders and my mental problems is that I had lots of them, and I have worked most of them through. The first thing was that I couldn't recognize mental health problems when I had one. That's the same example which I have talked a little bit earlier about my mental breakdown during my first year at medical school. I have learned to listen to myself, to recognize what my mind needs, what my body needs, what I need to do to feel better. And it's really important, and it's very... and I honestly don't understand why there is no topic to talk about it through the high school, because we had psychology course in the high school, but the thing is that it was completely bullshit. We haven't learned very much from it, because we were doing mostly essays, and we were writing about some type of stuff like Freud and so on, and that's pretty much it. There was no such thing when you should see psychologist, psychiatrist, it was in a very funny way, yes, ha ha ha, and that's it. And we couldn't recognize such mental disorders. We couldn't recognize when we needed help, and also stigma, and also cool facts from families, and in total, that brought me to the thing when I couldn't, when I was 19 or 20 years old, I couldn't recognize a mental breakdown when I had one. And the next thing which I had to deal with was not trusting people at all. I was not talking about sensitive information which could be used against me, even with my friends. It took me 2 years to start trusting one of my best friends right now, even though we were very close from the beginning, and I have checked some of my friends. I have shared with them some type of sensitive information with two of my friends, and I have watched whether this information will leak, and then I have known whether they have told somebody about it. And that pretty much worked, and that was one of the That's how I started trusting one of my best friends right now. Of course, time helped, of course, therapy helped, but still, I wasn't trusting people at all, and I was keeping everything by myself, and that was really hard if I'm looking in the retrospective right now. The next thing is that I didn't express myself when I wanted to, and here I'm talking about feelings about what happened, about a traumatic experience and so on and so on. And that's awful, because right now I understand what I needed to do, because the same art, the same dancing, drawing, music, even the thing which I was doing with one of my friends when we were going to the forest not far from the city. That's one of the benefits of living in Latvia. There are lots of forests around. We were going to the forest and simply screaming right there. And that was one of the ways to express feelings, and it really helped for some time. And next thing, and one of the most important things which I was doing, is that I was ignoring what happened to me and how it made me feel. It was just very, very far in my mind, and I tried not to think about that, but it actually made more damage than I thought it would make, and still right now I am dealing with it. And that's why the golden line through all this episode is that ignoring doesn't help, and that you should deal with your problems and not simply silence it. So how to deal with it? How to deal with all of that? How I have dealt with all of that? And therapy helps, talking helps, expressing helps, and not silencing or ignoring problems. One of the reasons why I have this podcast is to express myself, to share how I feel, share my thoughts, and especially during pandemic when social interactions were very limited, I needed some space to express my thoughts, my feelings, my ideas, just throw it out in the world, and it really helped. I felt very, very relieved. And if we're talking about such types of sharing, as podcasts, which you can create literally for free, only using your phone, it's very amazing. And it really helps. That was actually one of the ideas what my therapist told me to do, to share this thing. At first I was writing it down. Of course I was writing it down only in English in order so my family couldn't understand that, what was written down there. But then I decided that I can talk about it, because writing some things down is much easier than talking about it. And since I'm not seeing therapist for a pretty long period of time, simply because of the money, because as I said before, it takes a lot of money, especially for a student. And the thing is that this type of expression, it works for me. It will not mandatory work for you, but it works. And even if your podcast will be listened to only by your friends, it still works, and it still helps in many ways. Because at first I have learned how to talk for longer periods of time. Because if you will watch for my first episodes, they were 5, 7, 10, 15 minutes mostly, if I was talking alone, and right now it's something about half an hour, because I have learned how to do it. Then the thing which you have learned is not only how to talk, but also how to structureize my speech, because I was having scripts even before, because I needed to know what to talk about, but still it was very messed up, and right now it's not ideal. I can still see space for improvements, but right now it's much better, and it actually has helped me a lot during my studies, because still we're having lots of presentations, we're having lots of things to talk about, and knowing how to talk, knowing how to structure your speech, and knowing how to do everything of it, it really helped. And also, talking about my first episodes where it was like 10-15 minutes, I was talking there like in lots of cuts. I hope it couldn't be heard, but right now it's one, mostly two at maximum, two like cuts in the episodes, simply because I can talk for longer periods of time if I have a plan in front of my eyes, and it really helps. And also the most important thing is that I feel much more relieved, and especially when we're having this type of pandemic and you don't know when you will see like some people in person and when you can talk with some other people in person. It's very important for me, at least, when social interactions is like a very fancy thing, and is the thing which you can do every single day, not only because of your studies but also because of the pandemic. Also, next thing which I'd like to talk to you, the next message which I'd like to bring to you, is that silencing and ignoring never helps. Like, seek help when you need one. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, like, because everyone does them, because no one's perfect, and the only possibility to make no mistakes is not to do anything, because everyone does one. And of course, ask for help if you feel like you need one. It's not mandatory that you'd ask for help for the psychiatrist. Like, start from your family. If you feel like they're not understanding you, like your family, friends, and go then after. And of course, you can start with the psychiatrist as well, if you are having the same type of problems which I was having in my teenage years, of course. But still, ask for help, if you need one, and not try to ignore your problems, because it will go away only for like a very short period of time. And of course, as one wise woman told me, like, you're amazing. I can only agree with her. You're amazing. Do not ever forget about that, and I really hope you'll never have to experience the things I have described here. But if you will, remember that you can get through and life eventually gets better. And that was the first episode in a few about me talking about mental health problems. Hope you're having a great day. Hear you next week.